Welcome, and enter the shadows. Tonight, we journey into one of the greatest Gothic horror stories ever written. Dracula *. By Bram Stoker. A tale of darkness and light, fear and courage, where an ancient evil awakens and a small band of souls must stand against it. Settle in, close your eyes, and let the story unfold.
Chapter 1. Jonathan Harker's Journal. The 3rd of May. Bistritz left Munich at 8:35 p.m. on the 1st of May, arriving at Vienna early next morning. Should have arrived at 6:46, but train was an hour late. Budapest seems a wonderful place, from the glimpse which I got of it from the train, and the little I could walk through the streets. I feared to go very far from the station, as we had arrived late and would start as near the correct time as possible. The impression I had was that we were leaving the west and entering the east. The most western of splendid bridges over the Danube, which is here of noble width and depth, took us among the traditions of Turkish rule. We left in pretty good time and came after nightfall to Klausenberg. Here I stopped for the night at the Hotel Royal. I had for dinner, or rather supper, a chicken done up some way with red pepper, which was very good but thirsty. Get recipe for Mina. I asked the waiter, and he said it was called paprika hendel, and that, as it was a national dish, I should be able to get it anywhere along the Carpathians. I found my smattering of German very useful here, indeed. And made search among the books and maps in the library regarding Transylvania. It had struck me that some foreknowledge of the country could hardly fail to have some importance in dealing with a nobleman of that country. I find that the district he named is in the extreme east of the country, just on the borders of 3 states, Transylvania, Moldavia, and Bukovina, in the midst of the Carpathian Mountains, one of the wildest and least known portions of Europe. I was not able to light on any map or work giving the exact locality of the Castle Dracula, as there are no maps of this country as yet to compare with our own Ordnance Survey maps. But I found that Bistritz, the post town named by Count Dracula, is a fairly well-known place. I shall enter here some of my notes, as they may refresh my memory when I talk over my travels with Mina. In the population of Transylvania, there are 4 distinct nationalities: Saxons in the south, and mixed with them the Wallachs, who are the descendants of the Dacians, Magyars in the west, and Shiklis in the east and north. I am going among the latter, who claim to be descended from Attila and the Huns. This may be so, for when the Magyars conquered the country in the 11th century, they found the Huns settled in it. I read that every known superstition in the world is gathered into the horseshoe of the Carpathians, as if it were the center of some sort of imaginative whirlpool. If so, my stay may be very interesting. I must ask the Count all about them. I did not sleep well, though my bed was comfortable enough, for I had all sorts of queer dreams. There was a dog howling all night under my window, which may have had something to do with it, or it may have been the paprika, for I had to drink up all the water in my carafe, and was still thirsty. Towards morning I slept, and was wakened by the continuous knocking at my door, so I guess I must have been sleeping soundly then. I had for breakfast more paprika, and a sort of porridge of maize flour which they said was mamalaga, and eggplant stuffed with forcemeat, a very excellent dish, which they call implatata. Get recipe for this also. I had to hurry breakfast, for the train started a little before 8, or rather it ought to have done so, for after rushing to the station at 7:30 I had to sit in the carriage for more than an hour before we began to move. It seems to me that the further east you go, the more unpunctual are the trains. What ought they to be in China? All day long we seemed to dawdle through a country which was full of beauty of every kind. Sometimes we saw little towns or castles on the top of steep hills such as we see in old missals. Sometimes we ran by rivers and streams which seemed from the wide stony margin on each side of them to be subject to great floods. It takes a lot of water and running strong to sweep the outside edge of a river clear. At every station there were groups of people, sometimes crowds, and in all sorts of attire. Some of them were just like the peasants at home or those I saw coming through France and Germany, with short jackets and round hats and homemade trousers, but others were very picturesque. The women looked pretty, except when you got near them, but they were very clumsy about the waist. They had all full white sleeves of some kind or other, and most of them had big belts with a lot of strips of something fluttering from them, like the dresses in a ballet, but of course there were petticoats under them. The strangest figures we saw were the Slovaks, who were more barbarian than the rest, with their big cowboy hats, great baggy dirty white trousers, white linen shirts, and enormous heavy leather belts, nearly a foot wide, all studded over with brass nails. They wore high boots, with their trousers tucked into them, and had long black hair and heavy black mustaches. They are very picturesque, but do not look prepossessing. On the stage they would be set down at once as some old Oriental band of brigands. They are, however, I am told, very harmless and rather wanting in natural self-assertion. It was on the dark side of twilight when we got to Bistritz, which is a very interesting old place, being practically on the frontier, for the Borgo Pass leads from it into Bukovina. It has had a very stormy existence, and it certainly shows marks of it. 50 years ago a series of great fires took place, which made terrible havoc on 5 separate occasions. At the very beginning of the 17th century, it underwent a siege of 3 weeks, and lost 13,000 people, the casualties of war proper being assisted by famine and disease. Count Dracula had directed me to go to the Golden Krone Hotel, which I found, to my great delight, to be thoroughly old-fashioned, for of course I wanted to see all I could of the ways of the country. I was evidently expected, for when I got near the door I faced a cheery-looking elderly woman in the usual peasant dress of the district, who said, "The Herr Englishman." "Yes," I said. "Jonathan Harker." She smiled and gave some message to an elderly man in white shirt-sleeves, who had followed her to the door. He went, but immediately returned with a letter. "My friend, welcome to the Carpathians. I am anxiously expecting you. Sleep well tonight. At 3 tomorrow the diligence will start for Bukovina. A place on it is kept for you. At the Borgo Pass my carriage will await you and will bring you to me. I trust that your journey from London has been a happy one, and that you will enjoy your stay in my beautiful land. Your friend, Dracula." The 4th of May I found that my landlord had got a letter from the Count, directing him to secure the best place on the coach for me, but on making inquiries as to details he seemed somewhat reticent, and pretended that he could not understand my German. This could not be true, because up to then he had understood it perfectly, at least. He answered my questions exactly as if he did. He and his wife, the old lady who had received me, looked at each other in a frightened sort of way. He mumbled out that the money had been sent in a letter, and that was all he knew. When I asked him if he knew Count Dracula and could tell me anything of his castle, both he and his wife crossed themselves and, saying that they knew nothing at all, simply refused to speak further. It was so near the time of starting that I had no time to ask anyone else, for it was all very mysterious and not by any means comforting. Just before I was leaving, the old lady came up to my room and said in a very hysterical way, "Must you go? Oh, young Herr, must you go?" She was in such an excited state that she seemed to have lost her grip of what German she knew, and mixed it all up with some other language which I did not know at all. I was just able to follow her by asking many questions. When I told her that I must go at once and that I was engaged on important business, she asked again, "Do you know what day it is?" I answered that it was the 4th of May. She shook her head as she said again, "Oh, yes, I know that. But do you know what day it is?" On my saying that I did not understand, she went on, "It is the eve of St. George's Day. Do you not know that tonight, when the clock strikes midnight, all the evil things in the world will have full sway? Do you know where you are going and what you are going to?" She was in such evident distress that I tried to comfort her, but without effect. Finally, she went down on her knees and implored me not to go, at least to wait a day or two before starting. It was all very ridiculous, but I did not feel comfortable. However, there was business to be done, and I could allow nothing to interfere with it. I therefore tried to raise her up and said, as gravely as I could, that I thanked her, but my duty was imperative and that I must go. She then rose and dried her eyes, and taking a crucifix from her neck offered it to me. I did not know what to do, for, as an English churchman, I have been taught to regard such things as in some measure idolatrous, and yet it seemed so ungracious to refuse an old lady meaning so well. Mother's sake, and went out of the room. I was touched by her action, and shall wear it in memory of her. This is a secret record, and I do not want to be hampered with fears and superstitions when I have business to deal with. There is something in the air of this country that seems to breed superstition. At the last moment I was informed that the coach was about to start, so I hurried downstairs. The coach was driven by a tall man, with a long brown beard and a great broad hat, which seemed to hide his face from us. I could not see his features, but I could see that he had a hard mouth and large piercing eyes. Under his thick eyebrows he seemed to be looking at me sharply. He said to the landlord, "You have the Herr Englishman." "Yes," said the landlord, "he is coming." The man then pointed to me and said, "When I go there will be but one passenger." The landlord replied, "You have the right of it, for the Herr Englishman is the only one who is going to the Borgo Pass." The coach started, and we drove fast along the road. Soon we were among the mountains, and the scenery became wilder and wilder. Sometimes we saw little villages or castles perched on steep hills. Sometimes we passed by deep ravines and torrents of water. The moon was full and gave us a good light, but there were many dark shadows where the road wound sharply. The driver leaned forward and cracked his long whip and urged his horses on at a great pace. I could not help noticing that he seemed to know every inch of the road and every turning, and he drove as if by instinct. The peasants who saw us pass crossed themselves and pointed to fingers towards us. I asked the driver what they meant, but he only shook his head and would not answer. As the night grew darker, the driver seemed to grow more and more uneasy, and the horses were frightened and snorted and reared. Suddenly he stopped the coach, and jumping down, went a little way off into the darkness. I could see him moving among the rocks, and presently he returned, and without a word mounted his seat and drove on. We had now reached a spot where there were many stones and rocks. The wind howled through the pass and made strange sounds. The horses were trembling, and I could hear them snorting with fear. Just as we were passing a dark gorge, a pack of wolves began to howl around us. The horses reared and plunged, but the driver only cracked his whip and called out in a strange voice. The wolves drew nearer and nearer, until their howls seemed to come from all sides. Then suddenly the driver raised his arm and made a long sign in the air. The wolves at once drew back and disappeared into the forest. Soon after we came to a place where the road seemed to end, and the driver stopped. A carriage with 4 black horses stood there. The driver of the coach pointed to it and said, "The carriage of the Herr." I got out, and the driver of the carriage, who was a tall man with a long cloak and a hat that hid his face, bowed to me and said in excellent English, "Welcome to my house. Enter freely and of your own will." Chapter 2. Jonathan Harker's Journal. The 5th of May I must have been asleep, for certainly, if I had been fully awake, I must have noticed the approach of such a remarkable place. In the gloom the courtyard looked of considerable size, and as several dark ways led from it under great round arches, it perhaps seemed bigger than it really is. I have not yet been able to see it by daylight. When the calèche stopped, the driver jumped down and held out his hand to assist me to alight. Again I could not see his face, for the lamp was between us, but I could see his long arms and great strength as he lifted my heavy portmanteau and placed it on the ground beside me. Then he took out my rugs and spread them on the stone of the courtyard. This done, he sprang back on the box of the calèche, took the reins, and drove swiftly away. The horses' hoofs rang out upon the rocky ground, and their retreating wheels and hoofs died away into the darkness. I stood in silence where I was, for I did not know what to do. Of bell or knocker there was no sign. Through these frowning walls and dark window openings it was not likely that my voice could penetrate. The time I waited seemed endless, and I felt doubts and fears crowding upon me. Just as I had begun to think I must make an effort and call out, a door opened, and a tall old man, clean-shaven save for a long white mustache, and clad in black from head to foot, without a single speck of color about him anywhere, advanced towards me. He held in his hand an antique silver lamp, in which the flame burned without chimney or globe of any kind, throwing long quivering shadows as it flickered in the draught of the open door. The old man motioned me in with his right hand with a courtly gesture, saying in excellent English, "Welcome to my house, enter freely, and of your own will." He made no motion of stepping to meet me, but stood like a statue, as though his gesture of welcome had fixed him into stone. The instant, however, that I had stepped over the threshold, he moved impulsively forward, and holding out his hand grasped mine with a strength which made me wince, an effect which was not lessened by the fact that it seemed as cold as ice, more like the hand of a dead than a living man. Again he said, "Welcome to my house. Enter freely, go safely, and leave something of the happiness you bring." The strength of the handshake was so much akin to that which I had noticed in the driver, whose face I had not seen, that for a moment I doubted if it were not the same person to whom I was speaking. So to make sure, I said interrogatively, "Count Dracula." He bowed in a courtly way as he replied, "I am Dracula, and I bid you welcome, Mr. Harker, to my house. Come in, the night air is chill, and you must not catch cold." I was not able to light on any error in my belief that this man was indeed the Count. He was a tall old man, clean-shaven save for a long white mustache, and clad in black from head to foot. He had a very strong aquiline face, with high bridge of the thin nose and peculiarly arched nostrils, with lofty domed forehead, and hair growing scantily round the temples, but profusely elsewhere. His eyebrows were very massive, almost meeting over the nose, and with bushy hair that seemed to curl in its own profusion. The mouth, so far as I could see it under the heavy mustache, was fixed and rather cruel-looking, with peculiarly sharp white teeth. These protruded over the lips, whose remarkable ruddiness showed astonishing vitality in a man of his years. For the rest, his ears were pale, and at the tops extremely pointed. The chin was broad and strong, and the cheeks firm though thin. The general effect was one of extraordinary pallor. Hitherto I had noticed the backs of his hands as they lay on his knees in the firelight, and they had seemed rather white and fine, but seeing them now close to me, I could not but notice that they were rather coarse broad, with squat fingers. Strange to say, there were hairs in the center of the palm. The nails were long and fine, and cut to a sharp point. As the Count leaned over me and touched me, I could not repress a shudder. It may have been that his breath was rank, but a horrible feeling of nausea came over me, which I could not conceal. The Count, evidently noticing it, drew back, and with a grim sort of smile, which showed more than he had yet done his protuberant teeth, sat himself down again on his own side of the fireplace. We were in a sort of small room, which was lighted by a coal fire, and furnished with old-fashioned carved wooden furniture. The Count himself left me, and went out of the room to get my supper. I noticed then that the door was locked after him. I had to wait a considerable time for him. When he returned, he held a tray in his hand with a cold supper laid out on it, and placed it on the table, and said, "I pray you, be seated and sup how you please. You will forgive me that I do not join you, but I have dined already, and I do not sup." I handed him the letter from Mr. Hawkins, my employer, and he read it gravely. Then he said, "Welcome to my house. Come freely, go safely, and leave something of the happiness you bring." I had to sit down and eat alone. It was strange to me that he did not join me, but I supposed that he had some pressing business. After supper I smoked, and offered him a cigar, which he declined. He told me he did not smoke. Then he stood up and said, "We shall converse till morning, for it is late, and I have much to ask you." I sat down and began to talk. I told him of my journey and of my impressions of the country. He seemed much interested and kept asking questions. He spoke excellent English, but with a strange intonation, as if he were trying to pronounce the words exactly and not trusting to his own ear. We talked for a long time. I felt strangely drowsy, but could not sleep, for I was too much interested in the conversation. He asked me many questions about England and about London, and especially about the houses and customs of the people. He seemed particularly anxious to know everything about the life of Londoners and about the means of buying property there. When I remarked that he seemed well acquainted with English, he said, "I have been studying your tongue, and I thank you for your help. You must excuse me if I sometimes speak strangely. I have not been able to practice speaking with any Englishman for many years." He then told me that he wished to be in London for a time, and that he wished to learn to speak English so well that no one could detect him to be a foreigner. He added, "I would that you would stay with me a while, that I may perfect myself in your speech. I know you will stay with me for some weeks." We sat late, and he spoke much of his own land and of the history of his family. He spoke of wars and battles as if he had been present at them himself. Often he would speak of events that happened centuries ago with such vividness that I could almost believe he had seen them with his own eyes. His manner was grave and dignified, but there was something strange in his tone, something that made me uneasy. Suddenly, without any warning, a cock crew somewhere in the distance. The Count started, and a strange look came over his face. He rose quickly and said, "Why, there is the morning again. How remiss I am to let you stay up so long. You must be weary. Your room is ready." He took a lamp and preceded me down a winding stone staircase. The air was cold, and I felt a strange chill as we went along. He opened a door and led me into a large room, well lighted and warmed. The furniture was of the same style as in the sitting room, heavy and old-fashioned, but comfortable enough. He said, "You will need, after your journey, to sleep. Pray, repose yourself." He bowed with a courtly gesture and left me. I lay down, but could not sleep. Strange thoughts came crowding upon me, and the stillness of the place oppressed me. I felt as if I were in a prison, and that some dreadful fate was waiting for me. Chapter 3. Jonathan Harker's Journal. When I found myself fairly in bed, I pulled the clothes over my head and tried to think of all that had happened. I had never experienced anything so strange as the evening just past. What sort of man was this, Or what sort of creature was it in the semblance of man? I felt my heart beat with a painful quickness, and I wondered if it were the Count's presence that affected me so. I slept for a while, but my sleep was broken by dreams. I heard the howling of many wolves, and the strange sound was in my ears all the time. Then there seemed to come a violent knocking at the door, and I woke with a start. I could not tell whether I was asleep or awake, but I knew that I must have been dreaming. I was not called again, and I slept till morning. When I woke I felt much refreshed, and determined to try and see something of the castle. I went to the window and looked out. The sight was both strange and terrible. I was apparently on the edge of a lofty precipice, and there was no view except of a vast depth, where the black-yellow rocks went down sheer for 1,000 feet. A stone thrown from the window would fall 1,000 feet without touching anything. As far as the eye could reach was a sea of green treetops, with now and again a deep rift where there was a chasm. I went to the door, but it was locked. I tried the other doors, but they were all locked. The castle was a veritable prison, and I was a prisoner. I sat down and began to think over my position, but my brain was weary, and I felt myself drifting into sleep again. Suddenly I started up, fully awake, with the feeling that I had been asleep, and that something had awakened me. I could hear voices through the door. They were the voices of women, and they were speaking in a language I did not know. Their voices were soft and musical, but there was something in them that made my heart beat quickly. They were laughing such a silvery, musical laugh, but as hard and as cold as ice. I heard the door open, and 3 young women came into the room. I could see that they were all 3 beautiful, with great dark, piercing eyes that seemed to flash fire, and pale, fair skin, and red lips. There was something about them that filled me with uneasy dread. I could not move. I was rooted to the spot. One of the women came close to me and bent over me. I could see her eyes glowing and her lips parting as she whispered something in a low voice. I felt her hot breath on my neck, and then her lips touched my throat. There was a deliberate voluptuousness which was both thrilling and repulsive. I closed my eyes in a sort of languorous ecstasy and waited. Suddenly I felt a hand grasp my collar and draw me back with irresistible force. My eyes opened in wonder, and I saw the Count standing beside me. His face was pale and drawn, and his eyes flashed red with fury. "How dare you touch him, any of you?" he said in a voice of thunder. "How dare you cast eyes on him when I had forbidden it? Back, I tell you all. This man belongs to me." The women drew back with a mocking laugh, and said something to him which I could not understand, but which sounded full of bitter reproach. He turned on them with a fierce gesture and said, "This man is mine. Beware how you meddle with him, or you will have to deal with me." Then he turned to me and said in a softer voice, "Be careful how you sleep. There is danger in this place." The women went out of the room, and the door closed behind them. I was trembling violently and felt a horrible sense of fear and helplessness. I knew that I was in the power of the Count, and that I could not escape. Later in the day I saw the Count walking about the castle. I noticed that he never appeared by daylight. I could not find him anywhere in the daylight hours. It was only at night that he seemed to come out and move about. I made inquiries about the servants, but I could see no sign of them. There was no one in the castle but the Count and myself. He brought me my meals himself, and never ate with me. I began to feel the horror of my situation more and more. One night I went down a long stone staircase and came to a door which was not locked. I opened it and found myself in a great chamber which looked as if it had been unused for a long time. The dust lay thick on the floor, and the furniture was covered with dust. There were old tapestries on the walls, but they were faded and torn. As I stood there, I heard the sound of a door opening behind me. I turned quickly and saw the Count coming towards me. His eyes gleamed with a strange light. "You should not wander here," he said quietly. "This is not your place. Your room is ready." I tried to make some excuse, but he interrupted me and led me back to my chamber. His touch was cold as ice, and I felt a shiver run through me when he laid his hand on my arm. "I am beginning to fear that this is the end of my life. I am surrounded by dangers that I do not understand, and I am helpless. God grant me strength to bear what is to come." Chapter 4. Jonathan Harker's Journal. I awoke in the morning with a start, and my first thought was of the strange women who had come into my room. I felt my throat instinctively and found that it was uninjured. I looked around, but saw no sign of them. The room was as I had left it, and there was no mark of any intruder. I tried to collect my thoughts. I had been dreaming, or had I? I remembered the Count's furious face and his words, "This man belongs to me." That was no dream. I was in terrible danger. I rose and dressed, and went to the window. The same vast precipice lay below me, and the same sea of treetops stretched away in the distance. There was no path, no sign of road or village. The castle stood isolated, surrounded by sheer cliffs. I tried the door. It was locked. I tried the other doors. All were locked. Again I was a prisoner. I resolved to make another effort to explore the castle. I passed down the winding stone stair and came to a door which opened into a room, whose windows looked to the west. Here I saw that the castle stood on a rock that fell sheer on every side. There was no way of escape except by the air. I went farther down and came to another great hall, where I found a long corridor leading to an old chapel. The door of the chapel was ajar, and I entered. The place was thick with dust, and the floor was covered with broken stone. In the dim light I saw in one corner a great pile of old coffins, some of which were piled on each other. As I stood there, I heard the sound of something moving. I went cautiously forward and saw that one of the coffins was open. In it lay the Count. There was no movement of the chest, no sign of breathing. He lay like a corpse, with his eyes open and glassy, but without any expression. His face was even more death-like than I had ever seen it. His lips were blood-red, and his long sharp teeth showed slightly between them. For a moment I thought he was dead, and that I was free. But as I looked more closely, I saw that his eyes were fixed and not blinking, and that there was no sign of life. Yet I felt instinctively that he was not dead. I leaned over him and tried to see if there was any breath on his lips, but I could not detect any. His body was cold as marble. Suddenly I started back in horror, for I saw that there was blood on his mouth, and that it trickled down over his chin and neck. I could not doubt that he had been drinking blood. I fled from the place, sick with terror, and returned to my room. I sat down and tried to reason with myself. Was this some horrible dream? But the marks on my throat, and the memory of the women, and the sight of the Count in the coffin, were too real. I determined to keep watch on him. That night I lay awake and listened. The castle was silent as death. No sound came from any quarter. I rose and went softly to the door and listened, but heard nothing. I went back to bed, but could not sleep. In the morning I found on the table a letter from the Count. It ran thus: "My friend, I regret that I cannot see you today, as I have much business to attend to. But be assured that your comfort is my care. You shall want for nothing." This was written in a bold hand, but the paper was stained with something dark. I now knew that I must escape or perish. I searched my room for some weapon, but could find nothing but a small shovel and a piece of iron. I determined to use these if need be. Towards evening, I heard the Count's voice calling me. I went out into the corridor, and he met me with his usual courteous manner. "I trust you slept well," he said. I answered that I had slept badly. "That is the fault of the place," he said. "The air of the mountains is too keen. You must take care of yourself." We talked for a time of ordinary things. Then he left me and went away. I watched for him. At last, when the moon was high, I saw him come out of his room. He went down the stair and disappeared. I followed cautiously. He went to the chapel. I saw him open one of the coffins and lie down in it. Then he closed the lid. I waited for some time and then crept forward. I determined to see if I could kill him. I raised the shovel and struck at his head. The blade glanced off his forehead, making a slight cut, from which blood flowed. His eyes opened suddenly, and he fixed them on me with a horrible glare. I dropped the shovel and fled. I ran back to my room and locked myself in. I was now sure that he could not be killed like an ordinary man. The next day I found that my clothes and my papers were missing. I searched everywhere, but could not find them. I was now cut off from all means of escape. I wrote a letter to Mina, telling her that I was detained by business and that I should be home soon. I knew that the Count would read it, but I dared not write the truth. Soon after this he came to me and said, "Tonight you will write 3 letters, one to your employer, one to your fiancée, and one to your sister. You will write that you are leaving here tomorrow." I asked why. "It is necessary," he said. "You must do as I tell you." I knew that I was in his power. I wrote the letters as he dictated. They were all false. When they were finished, he took them and sealed them. "I shall see you no more," he said. "Your journey is ended." That night I knew that my death was near. I climbed down from the window, using the stones of the wall as foothold. It was a terrible descent, and the rocks cut my hands and feet, but I went on. I reached a window of the lower floor and crept in. I found myself in a room filled with old furniture and dust. I lay there exhausted and trembling. I know now that I must make one last effort to escape. If I fail, I shall perish. This is my last hope. Chapter 5 Letters, Lucy and Mina. Lucy Westenra to Mina Murray. The 9th of May. My dearest Mina, forgive me for not writing sooner, but I have been simply overwhelmed with work. Life is very dull here, and I am longing to hear something of your adventures. You must tell me all about Jonathan and his journey. I hope he will soon be back. I have something to tell you, and I hardly know how to begin. I have had 3 proposals of marriage in one day. Just fancy, 3 proposals in one day, and I, a poor girl, not 20 years old. I shall tell you all about it. The first came just before luncheon. I was sitting in my little morning room, pretending to read, when Mr. Arthur Holmwood came in. He looked very serious, and his face was quite pale. He told me he loved me, and that he wanted me to be his wife. I was so surprised that I could hardly speak. I felt so sorry for him, because I knew that he loved me very much, and I did not know what to say. I cried a little, and told him that I loved him too, but not in that way. Poor Arthur! He went away looking very unhappy. Then, just after luncheon, Dr. John Seward came to see me. He is the head of the asylum, and he looked so clever and kind. He told me that he had loved me for a long time, and that he wanted me to marry him. I felt very sorry for him too, for he looked so miserable when I told him that I could not be his wife. He said he would always remain my friend, and went away looking very sad. And then, Mina dear, just before dinner, Mr. Quincy Morris came in. He is such a dear fellow, and so brave and kind. He is from America, and he talks in such a funny way. He told me he loved me, and that he would give his life for me if I would only care for him. I cried again, and told him that I loved him as a friend, but could not marry him. He took it very bravely, and said he would always be my friend. Isn't it dreadful to have to hurt people like this? I wish I could marry them all, so that nobody would be unhappy, but of course that is impossible. I have accepted Arthur. Dear Mina, I love him truly, and I think I shall be very happy with him. He is so noble and kind, and he will make a good husband. Write soon and tell me all about Jonathan. I long to hear from you. Ever your loving, Lucy. Mina Murray to Lucy Westenra, the 12th of May. My dearest Lucy, I cannot tell you how glad I am to get your letter. 3 proposals in one day. My dear, you must be a very attractive young lady. I am so glad that you have chosen Arthur. I always thought him the best of them. You will be so happy together. Jonathan has been writing to me from Transylvania. His letters are strange and full of curious details about the country and the people. He says that Count Dracula is very kind, but there is something in his letters that makes me uneasy. I cannot explain it, but they do not sound quite like Jonathan. I am working very hard at my shorthand and my typewriting. I want to be useful to Jonathan when we are married and to be able to help him in his work. I am sure that a wife should try to be of use to her husband and not be a burden to him. I hope to come and see you soon at Whitby. I long to have a good talk with you and hear all about your happiness. Do take care of yourself, and do not overwork. Ever your loving, Mina. Chapter 6. Mina Murray's Journal. Lucy met me at the station, looking sweeter and lovelier than ever, and we drove up to the house at once. The old house is very pleasant, and I shall enjoy staying here with her. We have been walking and talking all day long, and I feel quite rested after my journey. The weather has been splendid, and we have spent most of our time on the East Cliff, sitting on the seat by the churchyard and looking out over the sea. The harbor is full of shipping, and the wind has been fresh and bracing. Lucy seems very happy, and talks continually of Arthur. She has a sweet way of making me feel that I am welcome here, and I think we shall have a delightful time together. The 25th of July, Lucy and I have been up to the churchyard again today. It is a beautiful place and commands a splendid view of the harbor and the sea. There are many old tombstones, some of them quite worn away, and it is strange to read the quaint inscriptions. One old man often comes and sits on the seat near us. He is very talkative and tells us all sorts of stories about the place and the people who are buried there. He says that he is the oldest inhabitant of Whitby, and that he remembers many strange things that have happened here. He told us today about a Russian ship that was wrecked on the coast long ago, and how all the crew were drowned. Lucy listens eagerly to his stories, and seems to like him very much. He calls himself Mr. Swales, and has a curious way of speaking, as if he were always half joking. The 26th of July today we met Mr. Swales again. He pointed out many of the tombstones and told us the names of the people buried under them. He said that the dead were better off than the living, and that they were all very comfortable where they were. Lucy laughed at him, but I could see that she was a little uneasy. He talked of death as if it were a joke, and it made me feel rather sad. The 27th of July, Lucy has been restless in her sleep lately. She talks in her sleep sometimes, and once she got up and tried to go out of the room. I was frightened and made her lie down again. She said she had been dreaming of strange things. I do not like her looks today. She is pale and tired and has dark rings under her eyes. I hope it is only the effect of the sea air. The 28th of July we sat in the churchyard again this afternoon. The sea was very calm, and there was a strange stillness in the air. Swales came and sat with us, and told us more stories of the past. He said that he felt as if something bad were going to happen, but he could not say what. Lucy laughed and said that he was always prophesying evil, but I could not help feeling uneasy. The 29th of July, Lucy walked in her sleep again last night. I woke and saw her standing by the window, looking out. I spoke to her, but she did not answer. I led her back to bed, and she lay down at once. She says she dreams of something calling her, and of a great dark figure standing near her. I am anxious about her, and shall watch her more closely. The 30th of July, Mr. Swales is very ill today. He did not come to the churchyard, and we were told that he had been taken suddenly ill in the night. Lucy and I went to inquire. But they said, "He could not see us. The sea has been very rough all day, and a storm seems to be coming on." The 31st of July there was a great storm last night. The wind howled round the house, and the waves dashed furiously against the shore. We went up to the churchyard today and saw a strange sight. A ship had run ashore in the harbor, driven in by the storm. It was a foreign ship, and there was no sign of any of the crew. The people say that only a great dog was seen to leap from it and run up the cliff. Poor Mr. Swales was found dead this morning, sitting on the seat in the churchyard. They say that he had been there all night, watching the storm. Lucy is much disturbed by all this. She is pale and nervous, and I fear she is not well. Chapter 7, cutting from the Daily Graph, the 8th of August, from a correspondent. One of the greatest and suddenest storms on record has just been experienced here, with results both strange and unique. The weather had been somewhat sultry, but not to a degree to cause any special apprehension. Just before 10 o'clock, however, the wind began to rise suddenly, and in a very few minutes a violent gale was raging. The coast was lined with people, watching the storm, and many were the expressions of wonder at the fury of the elements. A schooner was observed standing in from the northeast, and struggling valiantly against the storm. As she drew nearer, it was seen that she was steering straight for the harbor. The wind and waves drove her on with frightful speed, and it soon became evident that she could not enter safely. With a roar and a crash she struck the pier, and immediately swung round and grounded in the shallow water. Then a great wave lifted her and dashed her again against the pier. The foremast fell with a crash, carrying the crew with it. A strange thing was then noticed. The ship seemed to be guided by some invisible hand, for, though she struck heavily, she was steered straight into the harbor mouth. The lifeboat was launched, but no living creature could be found on board. The captain's body was found lashed to the wheel, his hands gripping it firmly. In his pocket was found a small bottle containing a piece of paper on which was written in Russian. This paper was taken to the authorities. One of the bystanders said that just as the vessel struck the pier, a great dog had been seen to leap ashore and disappear up the cliff. No one could say whence it came. Later inquiry showed that the vessel was the Demeter of Varna, bound for Whitby. She had left Varna on the 6th of July and had on board a cargo of silver sand and 50 large boxes of common earth, which were consigned to a firm in London. The captain's log. The 30th of June. Crew all in good spirits. Weather fine. All hands at work. Cargo stowed and secured. The 1st of July. Crew uneasy. One man says he saw something moving among the cargo. I reprimanded him for cowardice. The 2nd of July. Man disappeared last night. Could not be found. Crew in panic. I double the watches. The 3rd of July. Another man missing. We searched the ship from stem to stern. No trace. Crew refused to work. The 4th of July. A man says he saw something tall and thin moving on deck in the night. I cannot believe him. The crew are becoming unmanageable. The 5th of July. Another man missing. Only 3 left besides myself. I fear some terrible thing is on board. The 6th of July. Crew gone. I alone remain. I have lashed myself to the wheel. God alone knows what haunts this ship. The 7th of July. It is here. I feel it near me. My God, help me. Such is the story of the strange wreck. No one can explain how the ship came into the harbor with no living soul aboard. The cargo is to be landed and forwarded as directed. Chapter 8, Mina Murray's Journal, the 8th of August. Lucy was very restless last night, and I could not sleep for watching her. She was tossing about in bed, and her breathing was irregular. Once she sat up suddenly, and then lay down again, as if she were walking in her sleep. I spoke to her, but she did not answer. and her eyes were fixed and unseeing. In the morning she was very pale and complained of great weakness. There were 2 little red marks on her throat, like pinpricks. I thought at first that she must have been stung by a mosquito, but the marks were too close together. She laughed at my fears and said she was only tired and that the sea air would soon make her well again. But I do not like the look of her. The 9th of August, Lucy passed another restless night. I sat by her bedside and could hear her breathing in short gasps, as if she were dreaming badly. Once she called out, "Arthur," and stretched out her arms as if to clasp someone. In the morning she seemed weaker than ever, and would hardly touch her breakfast. I sent for Dr. Seward. He came at once and examined her carefully. He looked grave, and said that she must be kept very quiet, and that he would call again in the evening. He could not say what was the matter with her. The 10th of August, Dr. Seward came again today. Lucy is much worse. She lies very still, and seems hardly to breathe at times. There is a strange look about her face that frightens me. Dr. Seward has telegraphed for Professor Van Helsing, whom he says is the greatest living authority on strange diseases. I pray that he may come in time. The 11th of August, Professor Van Helsing arrived today. He is a small man with a keen face and kind eyes. He examined Lucy very carefully and then took Dr. Seward aside and spoke to him in a low voice. Afterwards he came to me and asked many questions about Lucy's sleep and whether she had ever walked in her sleep before. I told him all I knew and showed him the little red marks on her throat. He looked very serious and said that she must not be left alone for a moment, night or day. The 12th of August, Lucy is sinking fast. She is so weak that she can hardly speak. Professor Van Helsing has ordered that all the windows shall be kept open and that she is to be given wine and beef tea. He has also hung a wreath of garlic flowers round her neck. Lucy does not like the smell of them and begs me to take them away, but he insists that they must remain. The 13th of August, Lucy had a very bad night. She was delirious and talked of strange things. Once she called out, "Oh, mother, do not leave me," and tried to get out of bed. Her mother came in and was terribly frightened. She does not know what to think, and the doctors will not tell her the truth. The 14th of August, Lucy seemed a little better this morning, and we were all hopeful. But in the evening she grew suddenly worse. Her breathing became labored, and her lips were blue. Professor Van Helsing said that a transfusion of blood must be made at once. Arthur was sent for, and he came immediately. He gave his blood to Lucy, and after the operation she seemed to revive a little. Arthur was very brave, but he looked worn and pale afterwards. Lucy kissed his hand and thanked him. The 15th of August, Lucy is alive, but she is very weak. Professor Van Helsing says that we must be prepared for the worst. I cannot write more. My heart is too full of fear. Chapter 9, Letters. Mina Murray to Lucy Westenra. The 25th of August. My dearest Lucy, I write, and yet I have no news to tell you. Jonathan is still at Bistritz, and his letters are short and unsatisfactory. He says he is detained on business, but I can see that something is wrong. His handwriting is strange, and there is a nervousness in his style which frightens me. I cannot help fearing that he is ill or in trouble. I try to comfort myself by thinking that he will soon be home, but my heart misgives me. I wish that I were with you, dear Lucy, for I feel lonely and anxious here. I go on with my work every day and try to keep myself busy. I practice shorthand and typewriting constantly, so that I may be useful to Jonathan when he returns. But in spite of all my efforts, I cannot shake off a sense of impending danger. Write to me soon and tell me how you are. I long to hear that you are better. Ever your loving, Mina. Lucy Westenra to Mina Murray, the 27th of August. My dearest Mina, Your letter has made me so happy and so sad at the same time. I am glad to hear from you, but sorry that you are anxious about Jonathan. I hope he will soon be safely home. I am not very well just now. I feel so weak and tired, and I do not know what is the matter with me. Dr. Seward comes every day, and Professor Van Helsing watches over me like a kind old father. They will not tell me what is wrong, but I can see by their faces that they are uneasy. Sometimes I feel as if I were drifting away from the world, and then again I feel as if I were waking from a dreadful dream. Mother is very kind to me, but she looks frightened. Arthur comes as often as he can, and sits by my bedside. I feel so sorry for him, for he looks worn and unhappy. I wish you were here, dear Mina. I long for your voice and your dear companionship. Do come to me as soon as you can. Ever your loving Lucy. Dr. Seward's Diary, the 28th of August. Lucy is sinking. There can be no doubt of it. I have tried everything that science can suggest, but without avail. Van Helsing watches her day and night. He says little, but I can see that he fears the worst. The 29th of August, another transfusion of blood today. This time I gave my blood. She revived for a short time, but soon relapsed into her former state of exhaustion. It is as if some hidden drain were sapping her strength. The 30th of August. Quincy Morris arrived today. He came at once when he heard how ill Lucy was. He offered his blood for transfusion, and Van Helsing accepted it. Poor fellow. He bore the operation bravely, but I could see how it tried him. The 31st of August, Arthur is worn out with anxiety. He can hardly be kept from Lucy's bedside. Van Helsing insists on the garlic wreath being kept round her neck and garlic flowers in the room. Lucy does not like them and begs that they may be removed, but he is firm. I confess that I do not understand his treatment, but I trust him implicitly. Chapter 10, Dr. Seward's Diary, the 3rd of September. Lucy's strength is failing fast. Van Helsing remains with her constantly. He is very grave, and will scarcely leave her side even for a moment. I can see that he fears some great and final change. Lucy's mother is with her almost continually. She is tender and loving, but she knows nothing of the real danger that surrounds her daughter. Van Helsing has hung garlic flowers everywhere about the room, and has placed a wreath of them round Lucy's neck. Lucy dislikes the smell and often tries to take them off, but he always replaces them gently and firmly. The 4th of September. Lucy seemed better this morning. Her breathing was easier, and her color improved slightly. We all felt hopeful. Even her mother's face brightened with joy. But this improvement did not last. In the evening, Lucy became restless again. She tore at the wreath of garlic and cried out in her sleep. Van Helsing renewed the flowers and insisted that the windows should be kept closed and carefully watched. The 5th of September. A terrible thing has happened. Lucy's mother, thinking that the room was too close and full of strange-smelling flowers, went about removing them. She opened the windows wide to let in fresh air and took the garlic wreath from Lucy's neck. When Van Helsing and I returned, we found Lucy lying very weak and almost unconscious. Her mother was lying dead on the bed beside her, struck down by sudden shock. There was a look of terror on her face, as though she had died in great fear. Lucy herself was almost gone. Her breathing was faint, and her lips were blue. Van Helsing knelt beside her and tried to restore her, but it was in vain. She opened her eyes once and looked round at us. There was a strange peace on her face. She whispered Arthur's name and tried to smile. Then her head fell back, and she lay still. Lucy Westenra was dead. 6 September. We watched beside the body all night. Van Helsing would not allow it to be left alone for a moment. He looked very solemn and stern. Arthur arrived in the morning. When he saw Lucy lying dead, He broke down utterly and wept like a child. It was pitiful to see his grief. Van Helsing spoke to him with great kindness and dignity. He told him that Lucy was now at rest and that we must all be brave for her sake. Later in the day, preparations were made for the funeral. Lucy's face looked very beautiful in death, but there was something strange about it, a faint look of color on the cheeks and a softness of the lips that did not seem natural. Van Helsing noticed this too, and his face grew darker as he looked at her. The 7th of September, Lucy was buried today. Arthur, broken with grief, could hardly stand beside the grave. Van Helsing and I supported him. After the ceremony, Van Helsing spoke to me alone. He said that Lucy's death was not the end, and that I must be prepared for things which would shock and terrify me. There are worse things than death, he said, and Lucy is not yet free. I asked him what he meant, but he would say no more. He only told me that we must keep watch near her tomb. I do not understand him, but I trust him. His knowledge is greater than mine, and he sees dangers which I cannot see. I fear that some dreadful work has begun. Chapter 11. Dr. Seward's Diary, the 8th of September. I have been much disturbed of late by a series of events which I cannot understand. Several children have been lost in the neighborhood during the night and afterwards found wandering on the heath, weak and exhausted, with little wounds in their throats. The newspapers have begun to speak of a mysterious blue-fur lady who lures children away. Van Helsing has been reading the accounts with great attention. He says little, but I can see that he is deeply concerned. The 9th of September. Van Helsing came to me this morning and said that it was necessary for us to go at once to Lucy's tomb. I was astonished, but I obeyed him without question. When we reached the churchyard, he opened the tomb. The coffin was there, but Lucy's body was not inside it. I was struck with horror and disbelief. Van Helsing said only, "She is not there, but she will come back." We waited for some time in silence. At last Van Helsing motioned me to listen. I heard a faint sound like a child's sob. Then, through the trees, came a white figure, moving slowly towards us. It was Lucy. She was dressed in her burial clothes and looked more beautiful than ever. There was a soft color in her cheeks and a smile on her lips. In her arms she carried a child. When she saw us, she stopped and laughed a low, musical laugh, but full of cruelty. She held out her arms and called softly, "Come to me, Arthur." I could not move. Van Helsing raised his crucifix, and Lucy drew back with a look of rage and fear. She dropped the child gently on the ground and glided past us into the tomb. Van Helsing lifted the child and carried it home. The little one soon recovered and remembered nothing clearly of what had happened. The 10th of September, Van Helsing told me that Lucy was now one of the undead, and that her soul was in bondage. He said that we must free her, or else she would continue to harm the living. I was horrified, but I trusted him. He told me that Arthur must help us, and that the thing must be done with courage and love. The 11th of September, Arthur, Quincy Morris, and I met Van Helsing at the tomb. When the coffin was opened, Lucy lay there, looking more beautiful than she had ever done in life. There was a mocking smile on her lips. Van Helsing gave Arthur a stake and told him what he must do. Arthur hesitated, but when he saw Lucy's face change and grow cruel, he struck. There was a dreadful cry, and the body writhed. Then all was still. When it was over, Lucy's face became peaceful and sweet once more, like that of a child at rest. Van Helsing then cut off her head and filled her mouth with garlic. He said that now she was truly dead, and her soul was free. Arthur knelt beside her and prayed. We all felt that a terrible duty had been done, and that her spirit was at peace at last. Van Helsing said solemnly, "Now, friends, we have a greater task before us. The monster who made her thus still lives, and we must hunt him down and destroy him. Chapter 12, Dr. Seward's Diary, the 12th of September. It is all over. Lucy's soul is at rest, and the terrible task is done. Yet our work is not finished, for the monster who wrought this evil still lives. Van Helsing has told us more of the nature of the enemy we have to fight. He says that the Count is no ordinary man, but one of the undead, who lives by drinking the blood of the living, and who can change his shape and command the beasts of the night. He is bound by certain laws, and cannot move freely by day as he does by night. Arthur is broken with grief, but he has shown great courage. Quincy Morris bears himself bravely also, and has sworn to help us in the work of vengeance. The 13th of September. Today Van Helsing and I went to Purfleet to examine the house which Count Dracula has bought there. It is called Carfax, and stands in a lonely place near the asylum. The walls are high and old, and the place is very gloomy. We found that 50 boxes of earth had been brought there from Whitby and stored in a ruined chapel. Within the grounds, Van Helsing says that the Count must rest in his native earth, and that these boxes are his refuge. The 14th of September, Mina Harker has come to join us. She is pale and anxious, but full of courage. She has brought with her Jonathan Harker, who has at last escaped from the Count's castle. Jonathan is much altered. His hair is streaked with gray, and he looks worn and ill. He says that he has been in a convent in Budapest, and that the nuns saved him after he escaped from the castle. Mina read to us Jonathan's journal, which he had written in shorthand. When we heard what he had endured, we were filled with horror and pity. Van Helsing took the journal and sealed it up, saying that it must not be opened again until it was needed. He fears that the knowledge of such things may unbalance weak minds. The 15th of September we met again and compared all our papers: Jonathan's journal, Mina's letters, my diary, and the captain's log of the Demeter. By putting them together, Van Helsing says, we can trace the Count's movements and learn his plan. It is now clear that he came to England to find new victims and to spread his curse. Lucy was his first prey. Mina is deeply distressed, but she shows wonderful strength. She insists on helping us, and says that she will not be left in ignorance of what we are doing. Van Helsing admires her greatly, and says that she has a man's brain and a woman's heart. The 16th of September. We have made a solemn vow together to hunt down the Count and destroy him. Each man pledged himself to the task, and Mina, too, took the vow, though Van Helsing at first wished to spare her. We must now search for all the boxes of earth and render them useless, so that the Count may have no place to rest. This is the beginning of our great work. Chapter 13, Dr. Seward's Diary, the 17th of September. We met again today at my house, and Van Helsing told us that the time had come to act. He said that the Count's power must be weakened before we can hope to destroy him, and that this can only be done by finding and sanctifying the boxes of earth in which he rests. Jonathan and Mina were present, and all the papers were read again: Jonathan's journal, Mina's letters, the log of the Demeter, and my own diary. Piece by piece, Van Helsing fitted them together, like parts of a puzzle, until the whole plan of the Count stood clear before us. The Count has purchased several houses in different parts of London, so that he may move about freely and be safe from pursuit. One of these is Carfax, near my asylum, another is in Piccadilly, and others lie in distant quarters of the city. All are supplied with boxes of his native earth. Van Helsing said that we must visit each place in turn and render these boxes harmless. He brought with him holy wafers, which he placed in my charge. The 18th of September, we went first to Carfax. It was a gloomy, ruined place, surrounded by high walls and overgrown with weeds. The chapel in the grounds was falling into decay, and the roof had partly fallen in. We forced open the door and entered. Inside we found a grate. Number of boxes of earth, stacked in rows. The smell of mold and decay was everywhere. Van Helsing took one of the holy wafers and placed a fragment in each box. As he did so, he murmured prayers in Latin. He told us that now these boxes were polluted and could no longer be used by the Count. We worked in silence, and when it was done, we all felt a strange sense of relief, as if a weight had been lifted from us. The 19th of September today we visited the house in Piccadilly. It was newly furnished and richly decorated, but there was something in it that made me shudder. Though it was filled with costly things, it felt empty and lifeless, like a stage set prepared for some dreadful play. Again we found boxes of earth hidden in the rooms. Again Van Helsing used the sacred wafers to make them useless. Jonathan says that he feels now as if the Count's power were already lessened, though the monster himself still lives. The 20th of September we have discovered that one of the houses has been sold, and that the Count has moved some of his boxes to another place near the river. Van Helsing says that this means the Count suspects pursuit and is trying to escape us. Mina grows daily more anxious. She feels that the Count is near, and that some terrible danger threatens her. Jonathan watches over her constantly. Van Helsing has warned us that the Count may now try to reach Mina, since Lucy is beyond his power. He says that Mina is in danger and that we must guard her day and night. The 21st of September we have arranged that Mina shall never be left alone. One of us is always with her, and we have hung garlic in her room and placed a crucifix near her bed. She bears all this with patience and courage, though I can see that her heart is heavy with fear. Van Helsing says that Mina is our greatest help, for her clear mind and careful habits enable her to arrange and understand all our records. By her work we are able to follow the Count's movements, almost hour by hour. Yet Van Helsing looks at her sometimes with a look of deep pity, as though he foresaw some terrible fate. The 22nd of September. We learned today that the Count has left one of his houses by night and has gone to another. Farther west, Van Helsing believes that he is trying to hide himself from us, but he cannot escape for long. We have sworn again to hunt him down wherever he may go. I feel that the struggle has truly begun. Chapter 14. Mina Harker's Journal per Dr. Seward's Diary. Mina Harker's Journal. The 23rd of September. Jonathan and I are staying at Dr. Seward's house, and we are never left alone. One of the gentlemen always sits with us, and Professor Van Helsing watches over me with the greatest care. I know now that they fear some great danger for me, though they will not tell me all. Jonathan tries to be cheerful, but I can see that he is deeply troubled. He has terrible dreams at night, and often starts up in his sleep with a cry. Professor Van Helsing says that I must be very brave, and that I must trust him in all things. I do so, for I know that he is wise and kind. The 24th of September. Today the professor has been teaching us more about the nature of the enemy we have to fight. He says that the Count has great powers, but that he is also bound by many limitations. He cannot enter a house unless he is first invited. He has no power in daylight except in certain conditions. He fears the holy symbol and the sacred wafer. All this sounds strange and terrible, but it explains much that has happened. The 25th of September. I am anxious about Lucy's poor mother. It is so sad to think of her dying in such terror. I cannot forget Lucy either. Sometimes I think I hear her voice calling me in the night. Professor Van Helsing warns me not to think of such things, and says that I must keep my mind strong and clear. Dr. Seward's Diary. The 26th of September. We have made further search for the Count's hiding places. One house has been found in Bermondsey, near the river. It is a dark, neglected place, surrounded by warehouses and narrow streets. We went there today and found more boxes of earth stored in a cellar. Again Van Helsing purified them with the holy wafer. Jonathan thinks that the Count has already left this place, and that he is now hiding in some other part of London. The 27th of September. Van Helsing has grown more anxious about Mina. He says that the Count will try to reach her, since Lucy is now beyond his power. We keep strict watch, but I fear that even our care may not be enough. Mina herself grows paler each day. She says she feels tired and oppressed, as if some weight were pressing on her heart. The 28th of September. Tonight something terrible has happened. Jonathan and I were called suddenly to Mina's room. When we entered, we saw a dreadful sight. Mina was lying on the bed, white and trembling. A tall, dark figure bent over her. When we rushed in, the figure turned and faced us. It was the Count. His eyes blazed with fury, and his face was livid. He held Mina's head back, and she lay helpless in his grasp. From a wound in her throat the blood was flowing. Van Helsing raised his crucifix, and the Count shrank back with a snarl of rage. He threw Mina aside and fled from the room. Mina lay in a swoon. We carried her to the bed and tried to restore her. When she came to herself, she looked at us with horror and shame. The Count has marked her as he marked Lucy. Van Helsing says that Mina is now linked to the enemy, and that through her mind he may seek to guide his movements. This is a terrible blow to us all. Chapter 15. Dr. Seward's Diary. Mina Harker's Journal. Dr. Seward's Diary. The 29th of September. We are in deep trouble. Mina has been wounded by the Count, and the bond between her and the monster is now begun. Van Helsing says that this bond may grow stronger unless we act quickly. Mina herself is calm and brave. She insists on knowing the truth, and will not be kept in ignorance as Lucy was. Van Helsing yielded at last and told her all that we know. She listened quietly, though her face grew very pale. When he had finished, she said simply, "Then you must kill him for my sake, and for Lucy's sake, and for all the others." Her courage moved us deeply. Van Helsing says that Mina must be guarded night and day, and that every possible means must be taken to protect her. Garlic is placed in her room, and the crucifix never leaves her side. The 30th of September. We have learned more of the Count's habits. He can command the beasts of the night, and can take the form of mist or of a wolf. He can pass through narrow spaces and climb walls like a lizard, but he cannot bear the holy symbol, and he must rest each day in his native earth. If we can destroy or sanctify all the boxes of earth, he will be helpless. Mina has been helping us greatly. She has arranged all our journals and letters in order, and by comparing them has traced the Count's movements through London. She has a marvelous power of reasoning and a memory like a book. Van Helsing says again that she has a man's brain and a woman's heart, and that God has given her to us for our help. Mina Harker's Journal. The 1st of October. I feel strange and weak today. There's a weight on my heart, and sometimes I feel as if I were being drawn away from myself. Professor Van Helsing says that the Count is trying to reach me through my thoughts. I pray that God will give me strength to resist him. The 2nd of October. The professor has made a mark upon my forehead with the sacred wafer. It burned like fire, and has left a scar. He says that this shows the evil that has touched me, but also that I am protected from the Count's power. I do not complain. If this mark can save my soul, I will bear it gladly. Jonathan is very tender with me, and tries to hide his fear, but I can see it in his eyes. The 3rd of October. Van Helsing says that I must not be present when they go to seek the Count. He fears that the enemy may use my mind against them. I submit to his will, though it is hard to be separated from Jonathan. I know that they must act quickly, for the bond between the Count and me is growing stronger each day. The 4th of October. They have gone out to search for the last of the boxes of earth. I remain here under guard. I pray constantly that God may guide them and give them strength. I feel at times as if a dark cloud were pressing upon my brain, and then again as if some voice were calling me from far away. If they fail, I know that my fate will be the same as Lucy's. God help them in their dreadful work. Chapter 16, Dr. Seward's Diary, the 5th of October. We have made further search for the Count's remaining refuges. By Mina's careful comparison of all our papers, we have traced the last of the boxes of earth to a deserted house at Piccadilly. Van Helsing believes that the Count, finding his resting places destroyed one by one, is now preparing to flee from England. He says that the monster's power is already weakened, but that he is still deadly while he can find shelter in his native earth. The 6th of October. Today we went to the house in Piccadilly. It was empty and silent when we entered, and had the air of being hastily abandoned. We searched every room, and at last discovered several boxes hidden in a cellar. Again Van Helsing used the sacred wafer to make them useless. As he did so, Jonathan and Quincy Morris stood guard at the door, for we feared that the Count might return at any moment. When the work was finished, Van Helsing said that only one refuge now remained to the enemy, and that this must be near the river, so that he could escape by ship if pressed. The 7th of October, we learned today that the Count has indeed left London by night, carrying with him the last of his boxes of earth. He has been seen in the docks, and has shipped a great case marked as common cargo. Van Helsing is certain that he is returning to his castle in Transylvania, hoping there to recover his strength and to continue his evil work in safety. This news filled us with both hope and fear. Hope, because England may now be safe from him. Fear, because we know that while he lives, none of us can ever be truly safe, least of all Mina. Mina herself begged us with tears to follow the Count and destroy him utterly. She says that she can feel his thoughts at times, and that he is drawing her mind towards his own. 8 October, we have resolved to pursue him to the end. We shall follow him to his own land and strike him down there. Van Helsing has prepared us for the journey. He says that the powers of the Count will grow stronger as he nears his native soil, and that we must be on our guard night and day. Jonathan is eager to go, though the memory of his sufferings in the castle is still terrible to him. Arthur, Quincy, and I are firm in our purpose. We shall go by the quickest route to the place where the Count's ship has sailed, and follow him across Europe if need be. Mina is pale but resolute. She says, "Do not think of me, but of your duty. If you fail, I know what my fate will be. If you succeed, my soul will be free." Van Helsing took her hand and said solemnly, "Child, we go for your sake, and for the sake of all who may yet suffer. God will guide us." Thus our plans are made. The hunt has begun again, and now it leads us back to the dark land from which the evil first came. Chapter 17, Dr. Seward's Diary, Mina Harker's Journal. Dr. Seward's Diary. 11 October. We have been much occupied in preparing for the journey. Van Helsing has told us that we must take with us all that may be of use against the enemy: crucifixes, sacred wafers, and such weapons as we can command. Mina has been growing strangely quiet and thoughtful. At times she seems almost absent, as though her mind were far away. Van Helsing watches her closely and says that the bond between her and the Count is becoming stronger. The 12th of October. Today Van Helsing proposed a strange experiment. He said that since Mina is already linked with the Count, we might be able, through her, to learn something of his movements. He therefore placed her in a state of hypnotic sleep at sunrise and sunset, when the power of the vampire is weakest. Mina consented willingly, though she trembled greatly. When she was under the influence, Van Helsing questioned her gently. She said that she could see and hear nothing clearly, but that she felt as if she were lying in a dark, narrow place, and that she could hear the sound of water lapping and the creaking of wood, as if she were in a box on board a ship. This confirmed our belief that the Count was returning to his own country by sea. The 13th of October. Another experiment was made today with the same result. Mina again described the sense of movement and of water around her. She could not tell us where the ship was, but she felt that it was moving steadily onward. Van Helsing says that this proves that the Count has taken refuge in one of his boxes of earth, and that he lies hidden there during the voyage, the 14th of October. We have traced the route of the ship as far as we can. It appears that it is bound for Varna, on the Black Sea. From there the Count will travel by land to his castle. We have resolved to divide our forces. Some of us will go by sea to Varna, and others by land, so that we may reach the place before, or at the same time as the enemy. Arthur and Quincy Morris are eager to go by land. Jonathan wishes to go with them, but Van Helsing says that Jonathan must remain with Mina and himself, for her safety. Mina Harker's journal. The 15th of October. I know now that the Count is drawing me towards him. Though I resist with all my strength, sometimes I feel as if a voice were calling me from far away, and that if I were to listen to it I should be lost. Professor Van Helsing tells me that my mind must be kept pure and strong, and that I must pray continually. He is very kind and patient with me. The 16th of October. They do not tell me all their plans, but I know that they mean to follow the Count to his own land and destroy him there. I thank God for giving me such brave friends. Jonathan is full of courage, though I know that the thought of returning to that dreadful country fills him with fear. He hides it from me, but I can see it in his eyes. The 17th of October. This evening Professor Van Helsing again hypnotized me. I felt myself sinking into darkness, and then I seemed to hear the rush of water and the creaking of ropes. I knew that the Count was still at sea. When I awoke, I was very weary, but thankful that my mind was still my own. God grant that this may continue until the end. Chapter 18. Dr. Seward's Diary. The 20th of October. Van Helsing has at last spoken fully of the nature of the enemy whom we pursue. He gathered us all together and told us, calmly and solemnly, what he believes Count Dracula to be. He said that the Count is one of the undead, a being who has died and yet lives again, feeding upon the blood of the living. Such a creature can grow younger with the blood it drinks and can command the powers of darkness. It can take many forms: mist, wolf, or Batan can pass through narrow spaces as though it were no more than air. Yet, he told us, the vampire is bound by many laws. It cannot enter a house unless it is invited. It has no full power by daylight, though it may move then if it chooses. It must rest in the earth of its native land. It fears the holy symbol, the sacred wafer, and the crucifix. It cannot endure running water except at certain times. All these things, Van Helsing said, we have already seen proved by experience. He told us also that the vampire is cunning beyond all human cunning. It has centuries of knowledge, and can plan patiently and cruelly. It will not hesitate to destroy all who stand in its way. We listened in silence, for his words explained many things that had seemed impossible before. The 21st of October, Van Helsing went on to explain our duty. We must follow the Count to his own country and destroy him there, while he lies helpless in his box of earth. If we fail, he will recover his strength and spread his curse over new lands and new victims. He warned us that the journey would be full of danger, and that we must be prepared for hardships of every kind: cold, hunger, and perhaps death itself. Arthur and Quincy Morris declared at once that they would go wherever the rest of us went. Jonathan, though pale, said quietly that he must go, for it was his duty and his right. Mina begged us not to think of her safety alone, but of the safety of all who might yet be harmed by the Count. Van Helsing laid his hand on her head and said that she must not go with us. Her place would be with him until the last moment. When the enemy should be destroyed, She bowed her head and accepted his will. The 22nd of October. Our plans are now made. Arthur and Quincy Morris will go by land, by the quickest route, to reach the Count before he can reach his castle. Jonathan, Mina, and Van Helsing will go by sea and then by river, so that we may meet him at the Borgo Pass. Each man has armed himself with what weapons he can carry: knives, pistols, and the holy symbols which Van Helsing has provided. We have sworn again, in solemn words, to destroy the monster or to perish in the attempt. The 23rd of October. Mina is growing weaker. At times she seems almost in a trance, and speaks as though she were listening to some distant voice. Van Helsing says that the bond between her and the Count will grow stronger as he draws nearer to his own land. For this reason we must make all speed. I feel the weight of our task more heavily each day. We are no longer fighting for ourselves alone, but for the souls of others whom we may never see. The shadow of the Count lies upon us even now. Chapter 19. Jonathan Harker's Journal. The 30th of October. We have reached Varna after a long and anxious journey. Mina has borne the fatigue wonderfully, though I can see that her strength is failing. Professor Van Helsing watches her constantly, and will scarcely let her out of his sight. We expected to find news of the Count here, but were disappointed. The ship on which he traveled has not yet arrived. This delay troubles us greatly, for it gives him time to escape us. Professor Van Helsing questioned the harbor officials and examined the shipping lists with great care. At last he learned that the vessel had altered its course and was bound, not for Varna, but for Galatz, farther north along the coast. This was a bitter disappointment, but we resolved at once to follow. The 31st of October, we left Varna by boat and began to travel up the river. The weather is cold, and the nights are very dark. Mina grows weaker each day, and sometimes speaks as if in a dream. Professor Van Helsing hypnotized her this morning at sunrise. She said that she felt as if she were lying in a box, and that she could hear the sound of water and of chains rattling. This shows that the Count is still traveling by water. The 1st of November. We are now on the Danube, moving slowly against the current. The river winds through lonely country, and at times the banks are lined with dark forests. I cannot help thinking of the dreadful land to which we are returning. Mina is sometimes seized with fits of shuddering and clings to Van Helsing for protection. He says that the Count's power over her is growing as he nears his home. The 2nd of November today we learned that the Count's ship has been seen at Galatz. It is said that a great box was taken from it and placed on a wagon, which set out at once for the mountains. We know now that the enemy is making for his castle by land. Van Helsing says that we must hasten to intercept him before he reaches the Borgo Pass. If he once gains the shelter of his native soil, his power will be renewed. Mina begged us with tears to make all speed. She says that she can feel the Count's presence more strongly each day, and that her thoughts are being drawn towards him. The 3rd of November. We have secured horses and are traveling as fast as we can by road. The country is wild and lonely, and the nights are bitterly cold. Snow has begun to fall on the mountains. Mina is very weak now, but her courage does not fail. She says only, "Do not spare yourselves for my sake. Hasten, or it will be too late." Professor Van Helsing looks grave and anxious. He tells me that the final struggle is near. I feel that we are drawing closer and closer to the dark heart of the evil which has caused us so much sorrow. Chapter 20. Jonathan Harker's Journal. The 4th of November. We have at last joined forces with Arthur and Quincy Morris. They had followed the Count's track by land, while we pursued him by river and road. Their journey has been full of hardship and danger, but they have gained valuable information. They learned that the box in which the Count lies was taken from Galatz by a band of Slovaks in a rough wagon, drawn by sturdy horses. The men were paid to take it across the mountains toward the Borgo Pass. They seemed ignorant of the nature of their burden and thought it only common merchandise. Van Helsing says that this is the Count's last hope to reach his castle before we can overtake him. If he once gains his stronghold, it will be far harder to destroy him. The 5th of November. We are now traveling through the wildest part of the country. The road is little more than a track through forests and over rocky ground. Snow lies deep in places, and the cold is bitter. Mina grows weaker with every mile, and at times she can scarcely keep her seat in the carriage. Yet her courage never fails. She prays constantly, and her faith seems to give her strength when her body can give no more. Professor Van Helsing has begun to make preparations for what he calls the last defense. He has taught us how to use the sacred wafer to form a barrier which the Count cannot cross, and he carries always with him his crucifix and his holy books. The 6th of November. This morning Van Helsing hypnotized Mina at sunrise, as he has done each day. She spoke faintly of the sound of wheels and of men's voices speaking in a strange tongue. She could feel the movement of the wagon and knew that the Count was being carried nearer and nearer to his home. Her face grew very pale as she spoke, and she said in a low voice, "He is angry. He knows that he is pursued." These words filled us with fear and with determination. We must strike before nightfall, or all may be lost. The 7th of November. We are now close to the Borgo Pass. The mountains rise dark and terrible around us, and the wind howls through the narrow valleys like the voice of some evil spirit. Arthur and Quincy have gone on ahead with guides, hoping to intercept the wagon before it reaches the castle. Van Helsing, Mina, and I follow more slowly, for Mina can go no faster. Van Helsing has warned us that the Count's power will increase greatly as the sun goes down. We must reach the place of his resting before sunset, or our task will be far harder. I feel that we are approaching the end of our long struggle. Either we shall destroy the monster this day, or we shall fall before him. God grant us strength and courage for what is to come. Chapter 21. Dr. Seward's Diary, Jonathan Harker's Journal, Mina Harker's Journal. Dr. Seward's Diary. The 8th of November. We have pressed on without rest. The country grows more wild and desolate with every mile. Dark forests surround us, and the mountains rise like walls of stone. We know that the Count is near, and that the final struggle cannot be far off. Van Helsing is very grave. He speaks little, but his eyes are always watching Mina. Her strength is nearly gone, and at times she seems scarcely conscious. The 9th of November today, Mina was again hypnotized at sunrise. She spoke of the sound of wheels and of rough voices speaking in an unknown tongue. She said that she could feel the cold earth beneath her and knew that the Count was lying in his box and drawing nearer to his castle. Her face grew white as death when she spoke, and she clung to Van Helsing as if in terror. "He is angry," she said. "He knows that you are near. He is planning evil." These words filled us with dread, but also with courage. We must not fail now. Jonathan Harker's Journal. We have learned that the wagon bearing the box has been taken by a band of Slovaks towards the mountains. Arthur and Quincy have ridden ahead to intercept it, while Van Helsing, Mina, and I follow more slowly. The road is rough and steep, and snow lies thick in the passes. The cold is intense, and the wind cuts like a knife. Mina can scarcely endure the journey. More than once she has fainted, and we have had to stop and revive her. Yet she begs us not to delay, and says that if we lose time, the Count will escape us. Mina Harker's Journal. I feel the Count's power growing stronger within me as we draw nearer to his home. Sometimes I hear his voice in my thoughts, bidding me come to him and be at peace. I fight against it with all my strength and pray constantly that God may keep my soul pure. Professor Van Helsing is very kind to me. He tells me that I must be brave for a little longer, and that the end is near, evening. They will not let me go on farther with them. They say that I must remain here under guard while they pursue the Count to his lair. It is hard to be left behind when they go into danger, but I know that they are right. I have given Jonathan my last words of love, in case he should never return. My heart is full, and I can write no more. Chapter 22. Jonathan Harker's Journal per Dr. Seward's Diary. Mina Harker's Journal. Jonathan Harker's Journal. We are drawing very near to the end of our task. The mountains rise dark and terrible round us, and the cold grows more bitter with every mile. The snow lies deep in the passes, and our progress is slow and painful. Arthur and Quincy have gone forward with guides, hoping to intercept the wagon which bears the Count's box before it can reach the castle. Van Helsing has remained with Mina, for her strength is nearly spent. I fear greatly for her, yet she urges us on with all the power of her brave soul. Dr. Seward's Diary. Van Helsing and Mina have taken a different road, one which leads nearer to the castle itself. The professor says that he must make certain preparations before the Count arrives there. He has with him the sacred wafer and the crucifix, and all that may be needed for the final defense. Mina travels with difficulty, but her spirit does not fail her. She says little, but I can see that the bond between her and the Count is very strong now. Often she seems to listen to voices that we cannot hear. Mina Harker's Journal. I know that the Count is very near. I can feel him drawing closer to his home, and his thoughts press upon mine like a heavy cloud. Professor Van Helsing has been very gentle with me. He says that we must go to the castle and make it ready, so that the Count may have no refuge when he returns. We reached the walls of the castle at sunset. They looked more terrible than ever, standing black and silent against the red sky. I trembled when I saw them, for I remembered all that Jonathan had suffered here. The professor made a circle round me with the sacred wafer, and I felt at once safer within it, as though an invisible wall stood between me and the evil outside. He went alone into the castle, leaving me sitting within the circle. I could hear strange sounds from within doors creaking, and the wind moaning through the ruined halls. After a long time he returned. His face was very grave. He told me that he had found the tombs of the 3 dreadful women who had tempted Jonathan long ago. They lay in their coffins, looking as if asleep, with cruel smiles upon their lips. He had done what was necessary. He struck them with the stake and freed their souls. When it was finished, their faces changed and became calm and peaceful. I wept when he told me, though I knew it had to be done. Now we wait. The professor has made all ready. He says that the Count cannot enter the castle tonight, and that we are safe until morning. I pray that Jonathan and the others may be strong and swift, for I know that the last struggle is close at hand. Chapter 23. Jonathan Harker's Journal per Dr. Seward's Diary. Mina Harker's Journal. Jonathan Harker's Journal. We are now close upon the enemy. Arthur and Quincy have ridden on ahead with all speed. Guided by the peasants, who know the mountain tracks, the sun is sinking fast, and we know that if the Count reaches his castle before nightfall, his power will be greatly increased. The road grows steeper and more rugged with every mile. Our horses are worn with fatigue, yet we urge them on with all the strength we have left. The wind howls through the pine forests, and the snow drifts across the path, blinding us at times. We have learned that the wagon bearing the Count's box is only a few miles before us. The men who drive it are strong and stubborn, and they will not be easily turned from their task. I feel that the end of our long pursuit is at hand. Dr. Seward's Diary. Arthur and Quincy have pushed on by a shorter path, hoping to intercept the wagon before it can reach the Borgo Pass. Jonathan and I follow with what speed we can. Though the cold numbs our hands and feet, we can hear now and again the sound of distant voices and the cracking of whips. The Slovaks are urging on their horses, for they too fear to be out on these mountains after dark. Van Helsing and Mina remain behind, guarding the castle and making ready for the Count's return. The professor has told us that if we fail, all hope for Mina is lost. This thought drives us on more fiercely than hunger or weariness. Mina Harker's journal. I know that they are very near him now. I can feel the Count's anger and fear beating upon my mind like a storm. He knows that he is pursued and that the end is near. Professor Van Helsing has placed the sacred wafer about me and made a barrier which the enemy cannot cross. Within this circle I feel safe, though outside it the night seems full of dreadful voices. Sometimes I hear the wolves howling far away, and it seems to me that they are calling to their master. The professor says that they cannot come near me while I remain within the holy sign. I pray constantly for Jonathan and for the others. My heart goes out to them as they struggle through the darkness and the snow. Jonathan Harker's journal continued. At last we saw the wagon before us, moving slowly up the pass. Round it were a group of rough men, armed with knives and sticks. They looked at us angrily when we rode up, and at first would not let us pass. Arthur spoke to them in their own tongue and offered them money to give up the box. They laughed at him and tried to drive us away. Then Quincy sprang forward and seized one of the men. A struggle followed. Knives flashed in the dim light, and one of the Slovaks struck at Quincy, wounding him in the side. In the confusion we forced our way to the wagon. Jonathan and Arthur leaped upon it, and together they tore away the lid of the great box. Within lay the Count, looking as he had looked in life, with open eyes and a cruel smile upon his lips. The sun was setting fast, and its last red light shone full upon his face. Chapter 24. Dr. Seward's Phonograph Diary. Jonathan Harker's Journal. Dr. Seward's Diary. We have now discovered nearly all of the Count's hiding places in England. One by one we have made them useless to him, and his power has been greatly weakened. Yet we know that he still lives, and that while he exists there can be no peace for Mina or for any of us. Van Helsing says that the Count must now try to flee from England. Since he can no longer find rest here, his last refuge must be in his own land, where the earth of his grave will restore his strength. We therefore resolved that we must follow him to Transylvania and destroy him there. Jonathan Harker's Journal. We learned today that the Count has indeed left England. A great box was taken from one of his houses and conveyed secretly to the docks, where it was shipped under a false name. Van Helsing is certain that the Count lies hidden in this box, in his native earth, and that he is being carried back to his castle by sea and river. Mina grows weaker as the Count draws nearer to his home. She says that his thoughts press upon her mind like a heavy cloud, and that sometimes she feels as if she were being drawn to him. Against her will, we must make all speed, or it will be too late. Drive. Seward's diary continued. Van Helsing has devised a plan. We shall divide our forces. Some will go by land, and others by sea and river, so that we may intercept the Count before he reaches his castle. Arthur and Quincy Morris will take the land route, for they are strong and fearless. Jonathan will go with Van Helsing and Mina to guard her and to aid in the final task. We have armed ourselves with all that may be of use: knives, pistols, crucifixes, and the sacred wafers. We have sworn together that we will destroy the Count, or perish in the attempt. Mina Harker's Journal. I know that the Count is traveling homeward, and that his power over me grows stronger each day. Sometimes I hear his voice in my thoughts, calling me to him. I fight against it with prayer and all the strength God gives me. Professor Van Helsing says that my mind may yet help them to find the Count. since I am bound to him by the wound he has made. For this reason he hypnotizes me each morning and evening, when the vampire's power is weakest. When I speak under his influence, I seem to hear the sound of water and the creaking of wood, as if I were shut in a box on a ship. Thus we know that he still travels by water. Chapter 25. Dr. Seward's Diary, Jonathan Harker's Journal, Mina Harker's Journal. Dr. Seward's Diary. Our plans are now fully formed, and every hour is of value. We have traced the Count's course from the moment he left England, by the aid of Mina's strange faculty, and by careful inquiry among the shipping offices and the river authorities. We have learned that his vessel has changed its destination and is bound, not for Varna, but for Galatz. This discovery has altered all our calculations. We must now hasten to Galatz and from thence pursue him by land, for he will surely make for his castle by the shortest and most secret road. Van Helsing says that the Count will travel only by night, and that by day he will lie hidden in his box of earth. Thus, if we can reach the place where he is carried before sunset, we may strike him while he is still helpless. Our chief anxiety is for Mina, as the Count draws nearer to his native soil. His power over her increases. At times she seems almost in a trance, and her voice, when she speaks of what she feels, is as though it came from far away. Jonathan Harker's Journal. We have made all our preparations for departure. Arthur and Quincy Morris are to go by land, following the road by which the wagon carrying the Count must pass. They will ride hard and try to intercept it before it can reach the Borgo Pass. Professor Van Helsing and I are to go with Mina by water as far as possible, and then by road, so that we may meet Arthur and Quincy near the mountains. It is hard to leave England again and return to that dreadful land which I once fled from in terror. The memory of the castle and of the things I saw there still haunts me. Yet I know that I must go, for Mina's sake and for the sake of all who may yet fall under the Count's power. Mina bears everything with wonderful courage. She never complains, though I can see that she is suffering greatly. Sometimes she presses her hands to her head, as though to shut out some inward voice. Mina Harker's Journal. I know that the Count is drawing nearer to his home, and that his thoughts are more clearly in my mind. They come to me like a cold wind blowing through a dark place. Sometimes I hear his voice bidding me be at rest and to cease from striving. But I resist him with prayer and with the help of my dear friends. Professor Van Helsing tells me that while I can still pray and still love, I am not lost. Each morning and evening he hypnotizes me, and then I speak of what I feel. I can hear the creaking of wood and the wash of water, and I know that the Count is still in his box, borne onward by men who do not know what burden they carry. I tremble when I think that he is going back to that dreadful castle. I fear it as one fears a place of nightmare. Dr. Seward's Diary. We have learned that the Count's box has been taken from the ship at Galatz and placed upon a wagon, which is now traveling by slow stages towards the mountains. The men who drive it are Slovaks, rough and ignorant, but strong and determined. Arthur and Quincy have gone ahead with guides who know the forest tracks. They hope by this means to overtake the wagon before it can reach the Borgo Pass. Van Helsing believes that we must also prepare for another danger. He says that the Count may try to escape us by the help of wolves or of mist, if he should be forced from his box. Therefore we carry with us holy symbols and the sacred wafer to guard Mina and ourselves. Jonathan Harker's Journal. Our journey by river has been slow and full of hardship. The nights are bitterly cold, and the forests on either side of the river seem black and endless. Often I think of the wolves that prowl in these regions, and of the strange creatures that may obey the Count's will. Mina grows weaker with each day. At times she cannot bear the light, and keeps her eyes closed as though the world were too painful for her. Yet her spirit does not fail. She says to me, "Jonathan, If I should become like Lucy, you must promise me that you will not shrink from your duty." I could not answer her in words, but I took her in my arms and prayed silently that God would spare her. Mina Harker's journal. Last night, when the professor hypnotized me, I felt the Count's presence more strongly than ever before. I could hear men speaking in a strange tongue, and the sound of wheels upon a rough road. I knew that he had left the water and was now traveling by land. There was anger in his thoughts, and fear also. He knows that he is pursued. Professor Van Helsing says that this is a sign that our efforts are not in vain. Yet he looks at me sadly, and I know that he fears for my soul. He has placed the sacred wafer upon my brow again. It burns me like fire, and leaves a mark upon my skin, but I bear it gladly, if only I may be kept from the evil that seeks to claim me. Dr. Seward's diary. Our course is now clear. We shall go forward without rest until we reach the mountains. There, God willing, we shall meet Arthur and Quincy, and together we shall make the final attempt. We have sworn to each other that no one shall turn back. Whether we live or die, the Count must be destroyed. Never have I felt so deeply the solemnity of a duty. We are no longer fighting for ourselves alone, but for all who may yet be saved from the fate which befell Lucy. May God guide us in the coming days. Chapter 26. Dr. Seward's diary. Jonathan Harker's journal. Mina Harker's journal. Dr. Seward's diary. Our journey has now brought us into the wildest part of the country. The road is little more than a track through forests and over rough ground, and at times we are forced to leave it altogether and make our way across fields and rocky slopes. Snow lies thick upon the mountains, and the cold is bitter. We are in constant fear that the wagon bearing the Count's box may slip past us in the darkness. Van Helsing urges us on without rest, saying that every hour gained may mean the saving of Mina's soul. Mina is very weak. Often she can scarcely sit upright, and we are forced to halt that she may recover a little strength. Yet she will not complain, and begs us always to go on, saying that delay is more terrible to her than fatigue. Jonathan Harker's journal. This land is full of strange terrors. The forests are dark and silent by day, and at night the howling of wolves is heard on every side. Sometimes we see fires burning in distant villages, and the people look at us with fear when we pass, crossing themselves and muttering prayers. We have learned that the wagon we pursue is only a few hours before us. The Slovaks who drive it are rough men and travel slowly, stopping often to rest their horses. This gives us hope that we may yet overtake them before they reach the Borgo Pass. Professor Van Helsing hypnotized Mina this morning at sunrise. She spoke faintly, as though in a dream. I hear wheels and the voices of men. They speak angrily. He is afraid. He knows that you are near. These words filled us with both dread and courage. The Count's fear is our hope. Mina Harker's journal. I feel the Count's thoughts pressing upon mine more strongly than ever. It is as though a dark shadow were moving closer and closer to my soul. Sometimes I hear his voice bidding me be at rest and to cease striving, and to come to him where there is no more pain. I pray constantly that God may give me strength to resist him. When Professor Van Helsing places the sacred wafer upon my brow, it burns me like fire, but I know that it is my safeguard. Last night, as we rested in a poor cottage by the roadside, I dreamed that I was standing on a high cliff, and that below me was a deep black pit. A voice called to me from it, and I felt myself slipping nearer and nearer to the edge. Then Jonathan's voice called me back, and I awoke trembling. Dr. Seward's diary. Today we came upon traces of the wagon. The snow was deeply marked with the tracks of wheels and horses' hoofs. We followed them with all speed, though the path was steep and slippery. Towards evening we met some peasants, who told us that a wagon had passed only a short time before, and that the men who drove it were in haste and fear, as though they were being pursued. Van Helsing says that this is a sign that the Count knows he is hunted and urges his bearers onward by his will. Jonathan Harker's journal. We have now reached the mountains near the Borgo Pass. The peaks rise dark and terrible above us, and the wind howls through the narrow valleys like the cry of some great beast. Arthur and Quincy Morris, who went by a shorter road with guides, must now be close at hand. We trust that they may intercept the wagon from another side and so prevent its escape. Mina grows weaker with each mile. Her face is pale as death, and her eyes have a strange light in them that frightens me. Yet when I speak to her, she smiles faintly and says, "Do not fear for me. Fear only that he may escape you." These words cut me to the heart. Mina Harker's journal. The Count is very near his home. I feel it in every thought. His fear and his anger beat upon my mind like a storm. He knows that you are close to him, and that his time is short. Sometimes I see his castle in my dreams, black against a red sky. I hear the wolves howling around it, and the wind moaning through its towers. I dread it more than I can say. Professor Van Helsing tells me that we must not lose courage now, for the end is near. He has drawn a circle round me with the sacred wafer whenever we rest, and within it I feel safe, as though an invisible wall stood between me and the darkness. Drive, Seward's diary. Night is falling, and the cold grows sharper. We dare not stop, for the wagon cannot now be far before us. If it reaches the castle before morning, all may be lost. The men are worn with fatigue, but none will yield. Arthur and Quincy must by now be riding hard upon the enemy's track. God grant that we may meet them before it is too late. Never have I felt the nearness of death so strongly, nor the solemnity of our task. We are no longer merely hunters of a monster, but defenders of a human soul. Tonight, or tomorrow at the latest, the struggle must be decided. Chapter 27. Jonathan Harker's journal. Mina Harker's journal. Dr. Seward's diary. Jonathan Harker's journal. The wagon was now in sight. It moved slowly up the mountain path, drawn by weary horses and surrounded by the rough men who guarded it. The sky was red with the last light of sunset, and the dark peaks stood out like black towers against the glowing clouds. Arthur and Quincy rode in from the other side of the pass, as we had hoped. Thus we were able to close in upon the wagon from both directions. The Slovaks saw us and shouted angrily, raising their knives. For a moment it seemed that blood would be shed before we could reach the box. Arthur called out to them in their own tongue and offered them money if they would leave the wagon. They answered with curses and tried to drive us back. Then Quincy sprang forward. There was a fierce struggle. One of the men struck at him with a knife, and he staggered, wounded in the side. At the same moment Arthur and I leapt upon the wagon. With all our strength we tore off the lid of the great box. There lay the Count. He looked as he had looked in life, his eyes open, his lips curved in a cruel smile, and his face full of that strange, terrible vitality which had so often filled me with horror. The last red rays of the sun fell upon him, and in that light his expression seemed more hateful than ever. For one instant he fixed his burning eyes upon us, and in them was such a look of hate and triumph that my heart stood still. Then I struck, with all the strength that fear and love could give me. I drove my knife through his throat. At the same instant, Arthur plunged his blade into the heart. There came from the Count a cry so dreadful that it seemed to rise out of the earth itself. His body shook and crumbled, and before our eyes it fell away into dust and passed upon the wind. So perished the enemy. Dr. Seward's diary. When the Count was destroyed, the Slovaks fled in terror down the mountain path, crossing themselves and crying out that the devil had been among them. We turned at once to Quincy Morris. He had fallen to the ground, pale and bleeding from the wound in his side. We lifted him gently and laid him upon a cloak. He smiled faintly when he saw that the count was no more. "It is finished," he said. It was worth it. For her sake, Mina was brought to him, and when she knelt beside him, he took her hand and pressed it. "I am glad I helped," he whispered. "Tell them I died happy." Then his eyes closed, and with a peaceful smile upon his face, Quincy Morris passed away. There was not one among us whose eyes were dry. We had gained the victory, but at a bitter price. Mina Harker's journal. When I knew that the count was truly dead, I felt as though a great weight had been lifted from my soul. The dark cloud which had oppressed my mind vanished in a moment, and I felt free again. The mark upon my forehead, which had burned me like fire, faded and disappeared. I knelt upon the ground and thanked God with all my heart for His mercy. I knew then that I was saved, yet our joy was mingled with sorrow for our dear friend Quincy, who had given his life in the struggle. His brave heart had not failed him at the last, and he died as he had lived, faithful and fearless. We bore his body gently down from the mountains and laid him to rest in peace. Jonathan Harker's journal continued. Thus ended our long and terrible task. We had hunted the monster from land to land, and at last destroyed him in his lair. The curse which had darkened so many lives was broken forever. When we turned our faces homeward, the mountains seemed less terrible, and the cold wind less cruel, for we knew that the evil was no more. Mina walked beside me, weak but peaceful, and her eyes were full of quiet happiness. We spoke little, for words were poor things after what we had seen and done. But in our hearts there was a deep thankfulness that the world was freed from the shadow of the vampire, and that those we loved were safe at last. This concludes Bram Stoker's Dracula. Thank you for listening.